Right here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 9 Learning Target 4. So we're going to be talking about factoring trinomials, and we're going to be doing a review of that. So if you understand and remember how you do it, I am going to show you a little bit of a shortcut today. So I suggest you watch the video so you can kind of learn that shortcut. So when we were factoring, we're basically undoing the multiplication, or we're undoing the box method to do this. And we're learning to write an expression in factored form. So kind of the steps that we took were to first just factor out any greatest common factor that you have, is to get that pulled out and out of the way. The next is to determine the value of a. Now this is something we previously talked about before. So what we need to do is we need to figure out, is it 1, is it not 1? And then after that, we're going to set up our x. And the reason why we want to figure out if it's 1 or not is it's going to make setting up our x easier, and it's also going to make solving for the x a little bit easier as well. And you're going to end up rewriting the equation by splitting up your b terms and factoring by grouping. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this first one. Now here's the trick, okay? So first of all, there's no greatest common factor, and I see that the number on the outside here is 1. So that means I can use a reduced factoring method. I can use an easier factoring method that I haven't previously showed you. So if you notice that it's 1, when you go to multiply your x, you're still going to do 1 times 5, which is 5, and then you're multiplying to 6. So we need to figure out what multiplies to 5 and adds to 6, and that's going to be 5 and 1. Now here's the trick, okay? If this number right here is 1, that means that these right here are immediately your factors. So I have 2 parentheses, and instead of doing the whole factoring by grouping work, I can immediately put it into factors. So I have x plus 5 and x plus 1 as my factors. Now if you don't believe me, let's go back and do it the way that we normally did it. So we had x squared plus 5x. Remember that we used this to split up the b term, plus 1x plus 5. And then from here, we would go through the work to factor by grouping. So x squared plus 5x plus 1x. Come on, computer. I apologize, I'm using wireless and it is very slow. And then we'd go ahead and factor by grouping. Now, if you were to go through the work of actually factoring by grouping, you would end up with this answer right here. Now, that's only true when that coefficient with the square term is 1. So taking a look at number 2, I notice that the coefficient with the square term, again, on number 2 is 1. So I can take and I can multiply 1 times 16. And that's going to give me 16 up top and negative 10 down below. So I'm multiplying to a positive product and a negative sum. So that means that both my factors need to be negative. So I'm going to use a negative 8 and a negative 2, because that's going to add to a negative 10, but it's going to multiply to a positive number. So because, again, this is 1, I can immediately put this into factored form. So one of my factors is going to be x minus 8, and the other one of my factors is going to be x minus 2. I'm going to repeat to you again that this only works when you have both of those factors, or that coefficient, as 1. All right, let's take a look at number 3. So I noticed for number 3 that I do not have a coefficient of 1. So I'm going to have to use that grouping method that I talked about previously. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the first and the last. We're multiplying to a negative 4 and adding to a positive 5. So I'm asking myself what multiplies to negative 4 and adds to positive 5. Well, we can't use 4 and 1 because we have a negative 4, so we need a positive and a negative. So it actually turns out that there's nothing that's going to multiply to a negative 4 and add to 5. So this right here is not factorable for number 3. Now taking a look at number 4, if you recall, your first step was to take out a greatest common factor. So if you look at 3, 24, and 45, all of those are divisible by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take and I'm going to divide each of those by 3. So I get x squared plus 8x plus 15. So all I did was I took each of those terms and I divided it by 3. So if you remember when we talked about the greatest common factor, I kind of fronted it as the greatest common factor is like your little sister. So you can ignore it for most of the time, but it needs to be there at the end. So what you'll notice is now that I've taken the GCF out, I have a coefficient of 1 in front of the square term now that I've taken that out, which means that I can use the easy method of factoring. So I have 1 times 15, which is 15, and then we're adding to 8. So what multiplies to 15 and adds to 8? Well, that's going to be 5 and 3. So again, this coefficient is a 1, so I can go ahead and I can do x plus 5 and x plus 3. And I can go ahead and I can multiply those out. Okay? However, once I've multiplied those out, I need to remember, once they're in factored form, I need to remember that I have my little sister. So yes, I could use the easy method of factoring, but I need to remember that my little sister is up there at the beginning. So that needs to be multiplied outside of my final answer. So that right there is your final answer for number 4. Now let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, we want to set up our factoring. So we're going to take 4 times 7. So again, we're going to have to use that hard way of factoring because we don't have that 1 in front. So we're multiplying to 28 and adding to negative 1. Or we're multiplying to a positive 28 and a negative 1. Oops. So both our signs have to be negative, not positive. Negative. There we go, Miss Humphrey. Okay? However, I can't think of anything that's going to multiply to 28 and add to a negative 1. So again, this is going to be not factorable because I can't find out the x that works. Because remember, not everything in life works out. It's not always going to be factorable. Taking a look at number 6. Now for number 6, there's something that divides 6, 22, and 8. So that's going to be a 2. So you could take a 2 out of each. So we're going to divide each of these by 2. So then when I do that, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then x squared. 22 divided by 2 is 11, and then x. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. So then we have 3x squared plus 11x minus 4. And then we can close the parenthesis. So then I notice that even though I've taken out a greatest common factor, I still have a number in front of my x squared. So I'm going to have to use that hard way of factoring. So let's go ahead and review that. So 3 times negative 4 is not negative 14, negative 12. There we go. And you're adding to 11. So I'm going to have a positive and a negative factor. So what multiplies to a negative 12 and adds to 11? That's going to be a positive 12 and a negative 1. So now I need to use my factor by grouping method. So I'm going to focus on this polynomial right here. So I'm going to have 3x squared. Now, instead of writing 11x, I'm going to do 12x minus 1x. So I'm going to have plus 12x minus 1x and then minus 4. Again, I'm ignoring my little sister. I'll bring her back in at the bottom. So I have 3x squared plus 12x minus 1x minus 4. And then I'm going to need to factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my 2 groups. So out of the first group, between 3x squared and 12x, I can divide out a 3. So I could take out a 3 and an x, and then I'm left with x plus 4. Then, out of my second group, between negative 1 and negative 4, I can't really take anything out. But what I do notice is that there's a negative sign in the middle here. So that means I'm going to take out a negative GCF, and I'm just going to take out a 1 because I can't take anything else out. So then I'm left with x plus 4. So then I have x plus 4 left in each one. So I can go ahead and I can take out x plus 4. And once I've taken out x plus 4, I'm going to write in the parentheses what's left after that. So there's my x plus 4 slowly showing up there. And then what's left, not in a parenthesis, is 3x minus 1. So I'm going to write that. So again, I had to use that grouping method. The grouping method will always, always, always work. If you always want to use the grouping method, you can. Okay, I had to use it here because I didn't have a 1 in front of the x squared. I do need to remember my little sister at the very end, so then my final answer needs to be multiplied by 2. So that concludes your note video for today. Go ahead and show me a completed note sheet when you're done. Thanks for listening.